I just finished my training session with a squad of fighters, athletes, sports people, competitors, and I still compete at the ripe old age of 55. I'm still competing, as you can see. This is me in the competition mat in Argentina. You classify me as a mature age athlete. And during the training, I train with people from 15, 16 years of age, and I'm the oldest of the bunch, being the wise old cow, right? And what's amazing, I see these young kids jumping around doing these kicks and getting their bodies in these incredible positions, doing incredible athletic feats, as I used to do when I was that age, when my joints were made of rubber and my muscles were made of steel. But there's an old saying, if only I knew then what I knew now, I would have been a far better athlete. And I'd be a far better athlete today, and I wouldn't be as injured as I am today. What's amazing is when I do a training session, it takes me a good 20 minutes just to squeeze that synovial fluid out of that lasting synovial membrane, which is like a dried up old cloth, and try to get the joints going and lubricate and the muscles function again. It takes quite a while to get the old engine going again. When you were young, you didn't have to do any of that. You just get straight into it, bam, and you just started training. But what's amazing, when I look back in my career, I've been an athlete since I was 5 years of age when I started to play soccer in Papua New Guinea. Yes, I was the under-9 Port Moresby soccer champions, and through that journey I've done all the codes of football, and I've done the cricket and the gymnastics and the swimming. But my main sport is martial arts, which is quite physically demanding, and it puts the body in quite compromising positions when it comes to doing the kicks and the jumps and the punches and getting hit. And what I've found out over my time is that a lot of my injuries, and if you speak to any aging athlete or any retired sportsman, and you say, how's your body handling? And they go, oh my gosh, my body just took a beating when I was playing rugby, or when I was doing gymnastics, or when I was doing soccer or tennis. And they'll be left with lots of injuries that are very specific to that sport. For example, if they're a swimmer, they've probably got shoulder problems. If they're a netballer, they've probably got knee problems. So every sport has its injuries that are related to the biomechanics and the anatomy and the physiology of that sport. So if you speak to any retired athlete, they're always going to be saying the injuries that they got from that sport. Now, there are two types of injuries. You get those injuries which are just an acute event. You get hit, your knee goes into a weird position, and it's just from the traumatic forces that go through the joint or the body part at that particular time. But a lot of the common injuries that people get are what we call repetitive strain injuries. They're the injuries that the wear and tear of the body. And you find that I've got old football knees, I've got netball knees, I've got swimmer's shoulder, I've got tennis elbow, I've got golfer's elbow, whatever it might be. There's always going to be these related injuries through the repetitive nature of doing that sport, throwing the ball tens of thousands of times, swinging the golf club in the rotation of the back. And you find even the top people like Tiger Woods have had many lower back surgeries because of that repetitive nature of the game. Now, you can't get away from that. You actually have to do that movement. If I'm going to swim, I have to do that stroke. If I'm going to play baseball, I have to throw the ball in that way. If I play football, then I have to tackle this way. If I'm a fighter, I have to punch and I have to kick. Though there's no getting away from that. You actually have to do the specific sporting action for the sport, in the sport itself, and in training to get that skill to the level so you can perform it in the sport. So every sport's going to have an associated risk to it when it comes to injury and wear and tear and repetitive strain. And we get that, we accept that. When you play sport, there's going to be a risk. But as an exercise professional or a sports conditioning coach, which I started my career out in the 80s when I had my first company called Sports Elite, and I used to train elite athletes, elite sporting teams, Olympic gold medalists and international sporting teams. And when I look back in my past and what I used to do, I used to look at the sport and say, okay, I have to do sport-specific strength training or sport-specific conditioning. And the thing which I didn't sort of get, or the light bulb didn't quite go off, is that if that sporting action has a sport-specific injury to it, and I take that sporting action and I replicate it and put it under load with a heavy load, and I do more repetitive strain on that joint, but with a heavier load, with more stress, more trauma, then yes, it's going to work the muscles in that action, but it's actually going to accelerate and increase the repetitive nature on that joint that is already going to be susceptible to injury through wear and tear. You may have patellar tendonitis, or you have supraspinatus tendonitis. You may have lateral epicondylitis or medial epicondylitis or chondromalacia of the knee. All of these injuries, which are very common in sport, and any athletes listening to me, you know what I'm talking about, because you go, oh, I've got that, oh, I've got that, I've got that. If you look at my injuries, and I go from I've had plantar fasciitis, I've had osteitis, I've had patellofemoral syndrome, I've had strained calves, I've had sacroiliac inflammation in both left and right hand side, I've got a herniated disc, the degenerated disc in L4, L5, I've also got a subluxed right shoulder, or a supraspinatus tendonitis and the shoulder impingement in the left shoulder. I've got medial epicondylitis. Now, it used to be lateral epicondylitis, but at the moment it's gone to medial epicondylitis, and I've got medial epicondylitis on the elbows. So, if you look at all of that, yes, I'm like an old battleship. I'm sort of been battling away. But a lot of those injuries were started in my youth when I used to do lots of training for my sport. But a lot of the injuries were accelerated off the field, or out of the pool, or off the court, or out of the ring, which I did when I was in the gym. Because in my early career, I thought, okay, I have to look at the sport and I have to do sport-specific training, so my training is going to be more a replica of the sporting action. Now, not even realising I've already thrown, how many jabs have I already thrown in my fighting, or how many crosses, or how many side kicks have I already done it. Now I'm going to actually go and do it again in a gym and try to replicate the action, and then actually put a load on it. So I'll use an example, something which is, I used to train swimmers. One of my swimmers won an Olympic gold medal. Chris Feider, back in the 2000 Olympic Games. But if you look at the freestyle action, for example, this is a classic position for shoulder impingement. So if I want to impinge my shoulder, which means I take my humerus, this is my humerus, or the head of the humerus, and if I want to pinch the tendon that runs underneath this bone here called the acromion process, there's a tendon underneath there called your supraspinatus, which is one of the four rotator cuff. You have supraspinatus, infraspinatus, subscapularis, and teres minor. But the one that is more susceptible to injury is the supraspinatus when it comes from an impingement point of view. But if I want to impinge that tendon, the pinch means I grind it between two articulating surfaces, or two bony surfaces. I take my shoulder up to what we call abduction, I immediately rotate the shoulder, and now my shoulder is in an impingement position, which means the two bony surfaces are now compressing on the tendon, that soft tissue of the tendon of the supraspinatus, which starts in my supraspinous fossa, runs underneath the acromion process, and attaches onto the head of the humerus. So that's impingement. So when I go swimming, now that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's not like your shoulder's going to explode, because it's designed to do that. But it's not designed to do that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times. If I just do that, I throw a ball once, or I throw a spear at that running deer because I'm the hunter and gatherer, or I throw my rock at my neighbouring tribe who's trying to invade me and take my woman, I'll throw the rock, that's fine. But if I do this action, whether it be throwing or swimming like this, or butterfly, and if I do that to swim across the river to get to the hunting field, that's okay. But if I design a sport where it's racing and I have to win, therefore I have to train a lot, because a lot of injuries occur in the training process, right? They may be revealed on the field, or revealed on the court, or revealed in the pool, but they're actually generated many of the times in the training field. Now, that training field, I have to do this training so I can learn how to swim and do it properly. I understand that. That's natural. So yes, if you overtrain and you do too much swimming, and that tendon doesn't recover, because you train's fine, but you have to recover the tendon, and tendons take a little longer to recover the muscles, because the greater the blood supply to the soft tissue, the greater recovery. But this is specifically grinding not the muscle belly, but the tendon. Right? So therefore, if you're doing a lot of this every day, doing laps and laps and laps, and you can get away with it when you're young, when you've got nice, fresh tendons made of rubber. But if you start wearing them and wearing them and wearing them and wearing them, eventually they'll start to fray, they'll start to inflame, they'll start to degenerate. When they were flame, which is tendinitis, when they degenerate, they're called tendinopathy. It means they actually, and then they can eventually just completely rupture and tear, and that's a common thing, and that's a common operation. I used to work with kayakers, and they used to get a lot of shoulder impingement because their top arm is pushing the paddle this way, and they do a lot of that. It means it's classic shoulder impingement. But the impingement doesn't occur, or the tendinitis, the inflammation, the tendinopathy doesn't occur until a lot of volume of work has been completed. Now, ideally, you would have gotten through the peak of your physical career and won all your gold medals before that wears out. Now, if your training is not well balanced, means you're always training but you're not allowing recovery and you're not getting good nutrition and massage and physical therapy and all that to keep your body refreshed and regenerated and super compensated, then yes, your career is going to be shortened by injury because you've done too much training. But what can accelerate the wear and tear of that is if I start to do what we saw off the field training, or dry land training they call in swimming, where I go into the gym and now I'm going to specifically load that action. If I'm going to load that action, I'm also loading that compression, I'm loading that stress or that trauma. So, excuse me, if I go into the gym and I say, hey, I have to get my swimming action right, and I lay on a bench and I start to do this with a weight, like this, straight away that's hurting me already. Now I'm adding a weight to the repetition. That just accelerates the wear and tear of that tendon or that joint. And I go, oh yes, now I have to get cables and start to do this with the cables. And that's fine if your goal is to accelerate the sports-specific injuries, because sports-specific conditioning and sports-specific strength training many times leads and accelerates sports-specific injuries. So in my early career, when I had my company Sports Elite, I was going down that lane of I have to try to make everything very specific to the sport so I can get the greatest transfer of my dry line training into my specific training, my gym training, so that those results are shown on the field. Now, there's an old saying, if you want to get better at swimming, go swimming. If you want to get better at running, go running. If you want to get better at punching, actually go and punch. If you try to replicate that biomechanical action in the gym, then you're better off just going to the field, or going to the pool, going to the court, or going to the ring and just doing the action itself, because you can never really replicate it biomechanically in the gym anyway. First of all, if I've got a dumbbell and I'm doing this, well, the resistance is down. Yeah, the resistance is down means my muscles is working up, which is my deltoid. But when I actually swim, the resistance is through the water. So really the resistance is behind me. So I'm activating my lats. Now you may want to go in and say, well, let me get some cables and do this. But wouldn't you be better off just actually going, if you want specific, just do the specific action rather than a poor imitation of the action. So the imitation is nowhere as good as doing the real thing. The other challenge of the mimic action is you're loading it up to a level where your joints are in a compromising position. Because all the sporting positions are quite compromising. If I'm in a scrum, that's quite a compromising position with all these guys around me pulling into a scrum and getting that compression through my spine. If I'm serving a tennis, yeah, that's actually not a secure or a stable position when my arm is abducted or laterally rotated, which is the position of shoulder dislocation, and it's a very unstable position to actually generate. But because it gives me a good long lever, the tennis racket isn't very heavy, the ball's not very heavy, I can actually do that. But if I did that with a heavy weight, I'd actually probably injure or cause a lot of trauma of my shoulder joint and wear and tear, and accelerating that wear and tear. So what I found personally is that in the first half of my sports conditioning career, where I was training lots and lots of athletes, I was finding, and I realised light bulbs started going off, is a lot of my training was actually contributing to the acceleration to the injuries that my athletes were getting. For example, in the day when weight training started to enter into sports and conditioning back in the 80s and early 90s, then I was training my athletes in the gym 3-4 times a week. Towards the end of my career, when I started to realise all these light bulbs and start to understand anatomy and recovery, the supercompensation and injuries a lot better, by the end I was training the elite athletes 1 to 2 times a week, getting far better results from their strength training and far less injuries, just purely from anecdotally with my pool of athletes that I was working with. but that made a lot of anatomical, physiological, biomechanical sense as well. So what I learned is that if you try to replicate the sporting action, which is many times is a complex action, if I'm punching a bag, bang there, I'm punching on a bag, well, the weight of my glove is only light, and when I fight, my weight of my glove might be anywhere between 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 ounces, depending on what martial arts or combat sports you do. But if I go in there and I start to do this, like this, then that's a lot heavier than the glove. Now the load's going down anyway, but my force is going this way and the resistance is going this way. So the load is going perpendicular to my intended line of load and line of resistance. So straight away it doesn't make sense to do that. All I'm doing is placing more trauma, repetitive trauma, on my shoulder, which is already susceptible from me punching the bag or punching the speedball or doing rounds of sparring, doing hours and hours of training. Then I go to the gym when I'm supposed to be recovering, and I'm actually adding extra weight to the load and taking away from the recovery. So remember, what is the purpose of strength and conditioning? Is strength and conditioning. So let's get our body strong and conditioned in a way that it's going to be able to handle and withstand the repetitive forces of the sport, rather than make it the sport in a very non-effective way, trying to mimic the sporting action, then loading it up and accelerating the injuries or the wear and tear and the repetitive strain. So the philosophy which I eventually came up with is do on the field what is best done on the field, and do in the gym what's best done in the gym. But don't do on the field what's best done in the gym, and don't do in the gym what's best done in the field, or ring, or pool, or court, or whatever it might be. Meaning, if I want to develop my punch and punching endurance, then punch. If I want to get better fast at running, run. If I want to get better fast at swimming, then swim, specific to that action of the sport. And do it in a way where you control the intensity and the work to rest ratios that replicate the sport, and do it to the best as you possibly can with your high intensity, with then have good recovery. Now, if we do that, then those body parts of the sport that are prone to injury, whether it be the knee, the lower back, the shoulder, the elbow, whatever it might be, then make sure that in between your training, your sports training, you make sure that those joints are protected and can get more trauma to them because they're trying to recover. Now the big muscles such as the pecs and the lats, they recover quite easily, but it's the smaller muscles, the rotator cuff, that are going to take a bit longer to recover, and they're used in more actions anyway. So when I go into the gym, I don't go and say, now I've got to work the chest and the back for my swimming, I have to work the chest for my punching, I have to work the quads for my kicking. Well, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And when the weak link gets so weak it breaks, it doesn't matter how strong the big links are, you're not going to be able to use the big links because the weak links are broken. So it doesn't matter how strong and my back or my pecs and my lats and my big muscles are, if my little muscles can't stabilize a joint, these aren't working anyway because I've got pain in the joint, inflammation, and I can't use the big muscles because the little ones have been overtrained and they eventually might be injured, inflamed and experiencing pain. So you have to make sure you look after those weak links, because without them, the big muscles or the big links are not going to be to express the amount of force that you want to win the race or win the fight or win the bout or whatever it might be, or win the game. So make sure you protect those little legs. When you go into the gym, when you're doing a bench press or any big exercise, yes, you're working the big muscles, but you're also putting a lot of strain, load, force, trauma on the small muscles, the rotator cuff, the stabilizers, because they're working their little bottoms off to try to stabilize the glenohumeral joint, to try to keep the head of the humerus into a nice shallow glenoid cavity. So yeah, your chest is getting a good workout, but these little muscles are getting a big workout with a big weight. They're like, oh my God, I have to keep this bone in this cavity with a massive weight on it. And the big muscles are moving the main bone, but it's the little muscles that are holding the end of the bone into the other bone, being the scapula. So even though they're big exercises, those bigger the exercise, the bigger the stress, not on just the big muscles, but particularly the little muscles, which are trying to recover from thousands of tennis serves or hundreds of laps, or thousands of jabs and punches, or kicks, or whatever it might be. So many times, sometimes going to the gym can be contradictory and will accelerate the injuries that an athlete will have. So when you go into the gym, yes, you want to work all the muscles, right? But remember, if you're going to the gym 4 times a week or 3 times a week, or even sometimes 2 times a week, and you're already doing your sports training 5, 6 times a week for 1-2 hours of training, 2 hours of swimming up and down a pool, or 2 hours of in the gym punching bags and sparring and punching speedboards, or 2 hours of hitting tennis balls, or 2 hours of kayaking, and you do that 5, 6 times a week. Then you add another 4 blocks of 1 hour of heavy weight training. Where does the body recover? Where does it recover? Because the body has to recover. If it doesn't recover, eventually you're going to get diminishing returns in your training because you're leading towards overtraining. You start to hit training plateaus. You start to mentally go, oh my gosh, you start to feel tired, overtraining, and eventually you start to get the worst case is injury. But many times when you get the injury, you don't understand. That's not from the last exercise you did. That's from what you've probably been doing for the last so many months, if not years, of overtraining, and then you get that injury. And when you do get that injury, whether it be tendonitis or impingement or patellofemoral syndrome or sacroiliac inflammation, the amount of effort it takes to get that injury under control, get rid of the inflammation, get the recovery going, and get yourself back up to speed can be quite frustrating for an athlete. Once you've got the injury, it can take months and months and months and months, if not a year or years, to fully recover from it. But you've been slowly deteriorating that joint, deteriorating that physical structure for the previous years. So if you knew what you knew now back then, maybe you can adapt your training so you don't actually burn out or you don't get that injury, because the injury was maybe those things you didn't have to do that you did that actually contributed. The old saying, it's a straw that broke the camel's back. Well, this is not a straw, it's a weight. It can be a heavy weight too. So what I've learned is that when you go into the gym, your goal of the gym is to train the muscles while protecting the joints. You want to train the muscles while protecting the joint, not train the muscles while compromising the joint. Now, when you do a sporting action, if you're doing a spinning kick like this, for example, right, it's quite an impressive kick. He came forward, I spun, I threw my foot up and kicked him in the face. Now, that actually puts a fair bit of strain on your body, right? On the lower back, on the knee and everything, because it's quite a complex move. However, because I'm only lifting a tiny weight and it's a light glove, it's not going to be a major challenge. Unless I do 10,000 of them, and then I'll probably find my back will eventually wear out. If I add a weight onto my foot, if I put a 10 kilo weight on my foot and did it, then I'd probably blow my back out in as little as a couple of dozen kicks. Rather than the lightweight, I can do thousands of them for my sport. So when you go in the gym, don't try to replicate the sporting action, because all you're going to do is going to accelerate the injury associated with that sporting action. What you want to do is you want to work the muscles that are involved in that sporting action, but don't put them in that sporting biomechanical position. So if I'm saying a swimmer, yes, I want to work on my pecs and my lats. So I'm going to put my body in a safe position where I'm not going to put any trauma on my joints or tendons, where I can work the muscles. So for example, I'll go in there and I'm going to do a bench press. So I'm going to do a bench press, my elbows a little bit lower, not up here where I'm going to get more aggravation or shoulder impingement. I get enough of that in swimming. So I'm not going to put my shoulders up there because I want that tendon to recover while I'm working in the muscle. So I'll come in here and I might just do good controlled bench press. So I'm getting my muscles strong in a safe position without deteriorating the joints or the tendons. In this position, I'm working the pecs, I'm working the shoulders, I'm working the arms. I'm also working the supraspinatus, but it's not in an impingement position. So the supraspinatus is working. If I do a back exercise, I might do a row, I'm working the lats, I'm working the shoulders, I'm working the arms, but I'm not working in a position that's compromising the joint or impinging the tendon that's already suffered from lots of impingement from my swimming. That way I'm working all the same muscles. I'm working all the same muscles as I would if I get my weight, right, like this. And because I'm in such a biomechanically ineffective position and weak position, I can't lift a heavy weight anyway. So I'm not really getting strong, because the limiting factor to that action is not my chest, it's not my lats, is probably my delts and rotator cuff. So all I'm doing is overloading those weak links which are already trying to recover. What I'm trying to do is work on the big muscles which drive myself through the pool, while the smaller muscle groups stabilise the joint so my big muscles can work more effectively. So if I protect these ones and work these ones will never overtrain, so these ones will be able to perform at the elite level, because as soon as these ones blow, these ones aren't working. These aren't working because this can't hold the joint in place for my big muscles to work more effectively. So my point being is, when you go into the gym, just do the basic full body compound safe exercises with a controlled movement pattern, and focus on just getting strong. And if you get strong in, say, a chest press, if you get strong in a row, you get strong in a squat or squatting action. And even if I'm doing a squat, I'm still working all the legs. I'm working the lower back and the glutes. I'm working the stabilizers, the core, the calves. But I don't necessarily have to go in there and put ankle weights on my foot and start kicking, right? I'll save that for when it really counts, by kicking a bag or kicking a sparring partner or kicking focus pads, where it's the exact biomechanical movement pattern that I want to train under condition. But if I want to get strong, I can't get strong doing that because the load's too light, but I can get strong putting myself in a good, stable squatting position or lunge position, and with a controlled movement, get all those muscles strong while protecting the joints of my knee and my lower back, which are the ones that are more prone for, say, kicking or running or lower body type sporting actions. Get them strong in a controlled movement pattern, and then just let the sport take care of the specificity of the strength. Get strong in the gym in safe compound-based exercises, and then let your conditioning on the field, in the ring, in the pool, on the court, let that take care of the transfer of that strength and into the sporting mode. Don't try to do in the gym what's best done in the field, and don't do in the field what's best done in the gym. What's best done in the gym is I can control weight, I can get my body in a good strong position, whether it be a bench press, whether it be a squat, whether it be a row, and I can get myself in a good stable position. Everything's nice and stable. I can really load up with a heavier load. Right? Because I can't lift if I'm doing a bench press, for example, if I can do, say, 100 kilos, well, I can't do 50 kilo with each arm doing this. That's only 5 kilos, and it's already hurting me. But I can do, say, a 100 kilo chest press, which is going to activate all these muscles that will be activated and stronger while protecting the joint, so that when I go in the pool, I'm going to have strong muscles to specifically apply to the sporting motion. That's going to make me faster, that's make me stronger. But also it's going to reduce the chances of injury, because if my muscles are all strong in a safe position, then it's going to stabilise the joint when I actually do a sporting action in not so safe position. Because this is not a safe position in a repetitive way, because you're going to have wear and tear. But if the more stronger my muscles are, my stabilisers are, the less stress will go through the joints. So in a nutshell, when you go to a sports, people say, I'm a sports conditioning specialist. Yes, a specialist means you have to understand anatomy, physiology, and biomechanics enough to know what to do in the gym that doesn't adverse the athlete's health and their joints and their potential of injury, because an injured athlete is not competing. An injured athlete, I know I was training a baseballer. I used to train a number of baseballers from the Milwaukee Brewers Major League Baseball team, and one of them was on millions of dollars a year. So that really gets you thinking, if I injure this person prematurely, then that's going to shorten their career. And every year off is going to cost them at least $5 million. Now that's a huge responsibility. So I don't want to be just sort of, hey, let's go in there gun-ho and start lifting weights and whatever crazy things on social media, swinging weights around and all sorts of stuff, because that's just going to lead to injury. And every injury is going to take away from their career, which can be a huge financial loss. I always remember one of my athletes in the kayak squad, and we were training for the Olympics. And we're only 6 weeks out, and we're in the gym, I was doing an exercise, and it was a silly exercise, because it's an exercise that I got from a journal over in the USA, written by the US Olympic canoe coach. And I looked at the program and go, okay, if the US Olympic canoe coach is doing this, it must be okay, without thinking for myself. So I basically copied some of the exercise and got them to. And one of the exercises was an overhead tricep press with a easy bar. And the reasoning behind that was, and I can't recall, but if I was justifying it from an anatomical point of view, well, if I do an overhead, it works the tricep. Because my arm is above my head, I get a pre-stretch on the long-headed tricep, because the long-headed tricep is a biarticulate muscle, goes across the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. It originates in the lateral border of the scapula and inserts over here onto the ulna. Therefore, I'm getting a stretch across the elbow and I'm getting a stretch across the shoulders. Therefore, I get a bigger stretch, therefore more stretch. If you look at the elasticity of muscle, the bigger, the more stretch it is, the greater the amount of force that it generates. Like an elastic band, the more I put it apart, the more it pulls together. Therefore, this is going to be the best exercise to work my long-headed tricep, which in hand, when I'm doing a canoe action, because when canoe action, yes, the tricep extends the elbow, because the long-headed tricep also extends the shoulder joint. So when I do a canoeing action, yes, my shoulder goes to extension, which is caused by the latissimus dorsi, the teres major, and the deltoids, but also a small component would be the long-headed tricep, because it's a biarticulate muscle group. Therefore, if I work it up here, it's going to be stronger to help in my canoeing. So there's my anatomical justification. It sounds quite impressive, doesn't it? And yes, there is a certain anatomical truth to that, to a certain level. But the challenge I had is that I got him doing that, and I was 6 weeks out from the Barcelona Olympic Games, and I hear this smash and crash behind me. I turn around and he's on the ground, the weight's all over the place, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what happened on my watch? My heart just dropped, and I thought, my gosh, I hope. The first thing I thought, because this was his last chance at the Olympics, because he's at that age, he was in his early 30s, this was his last hurrah to go to the Olympic Games, and I thought I've just pulled his dream out from underneath him. He didn't injure himself in the canoe in the water, he injured himself in the gym on my watch, on my program, and my exercise. And it wasn't even my exercise, it was the Olympic canoe coach of the USA's exercise, which I just blindly grabbed and did because I thought he must know what he's doing. There's a lot of people who think they look at someone on social media and they're a famous person. I think, oh, they must know what they're doing. And I started to think to myself, why? The good news, he recovered. We engaged in great recovery with a good friend of mine who is the sports physiotherapist, and he went to the Olympics and did well and picked up a medal, which is super cool. However, I could have taken that whole dream away from him. And that's when I started thinking, why am I doing this and how does it work? Why am I doing this and how does it work? And start thinking for yourself. And then I realized, what has this action got anything to do with canoeing? Or kayaking for that matter, because I was training the kayak team. And this action is taking the arm into abduction, lateral rotation with a weight at the end, and I'm going behind my head, I'm going backward this way. And if I want to dislocate someone's shoulder joint, that's exactly what I do. I take the arm out, I'd abduct it, lateral rotate it, and that's the most unstable position the glenohumeral joint can be in, and that's how I dislocate. So why do I put someone's shoulder in a dislocated position and add a weight to it, also aggravating the chances of impingement, which kayakers are already prone to. So all I'm doing is just accelerating and increasing the risk, and for what return? To try to target the long-headed tricep in a position which isn't even specific to the rowing. So that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But if I actually just ditched that exercise and just did a good controlled row, then I'm going to be training, yes, my biceps and my arms, my deltoids, my lats, my teres major, all of those, and I'll be also training the long-headed tricep in a movement pattern which is more specific to the canoeing or the rowing action with a heavy load, because they can't hit the heavy load up here because the joint's too unstable when you're in too much of a weak position, in a compromised position. So here I can put him in a strong position with a strong movement pattern to lift a strong weight to get a strong result. That would have a greater transfer into kayaking anyway. Plus, there'd be one less exercise that I'd have to do. So what I found is when I just focus on the core base exercises, instead of giving a program consisting of 10, 11, 12 exercises, my programming went down to 3, 4, 5 exercises, but they're just the big exercises, good strong movement patterns, good quality effort into it, high levels of intensity, nice and strong movement, and just get them strong. And then go home and rest, and then get out on the canals and start training, or get into the pool, or get into the court, or get into the ring and start doing the real training, which is most important, which is your sport. So less time in the gym, but more quality and safer, with good compound exercises that protects the joints and protects the tendons and protects them from injury, doesn't contribute to the injury. That way they can play their sport. And not only will they play their sport, they'll be more refreshed, they'll be stronger, they won't be overtrained, and most importantly, they're less likely to get injured. Because a lot of the injuries that occur on the field started off the field. If someone tears a hamstring on the field, it's probably because their hamstring's been overtrained from all the stuff they're doing in the gym and all the stuff they're doing in training. Therefore, when they go into the field in a high-pressured, high-emotional, high-performance type mode, and you really adrenaline's pumping and you're going for it, and if your hamstring is not fully recovered and you start to express forces which are beyond what you normally express, say in training, because you're in the field with an opponent and you have to tackle them, then that hamstring will start to activate more than what you'd normally, and if it's not recovered, you actually start to twing it and injure it. And I still get that to this day. I'll get times when I'll be training and I'll feel a twinge in my calf, particularly my calves, or hamstring, and I'll stop and I go, I better stop, I've got to have some rest, because that's just a little clue that says it's not what I did in that movement pattern, because I do that movement pattern all the time in training, I do that movement pattern all the time in competition. But when I start to get twings and twangs and the body speaks to you, that means you've probably been doing too much of that movement pattern, or more better said, less recovery between the training of that movement pattern. So yes, it's very hard to overtrain, but it's very easy to under-recover. So pick good, safe exercises that don't aggravate the problem and give them plenty of recovery in between high-quality training sessions, and you get the best out of your athlete, and they go in their game on, mind on, body on, and joints, tendons, muscles refreshed to perform to that elite level.